there was a community there I should have been able to go find, and I just didn't know where to start.
CHD patients suffer silent and alone. What we hear most often is that they feel less alone after connecting with a peer.
If you don't need a mentor, then go be a mentor. This is the 1% Heart, a podcast about the millions of people living with congenital heart defects. This episode, we're going to discuss the value of peer mentors and community support. This is a special episode supporting the Adult Congenital Heart Association's Peer Mentor Program. This program provides a unique opportunity for CHD patients and their families to connect and support one another. The Heart-to-Heart Peer Mentor Program is recruiting patients and family members as mentors. It is an excellent opportunity to give back to the community. I'm going to put a link in show notes, and you can find more information there and also on the ACHA's website. Applications close February 18th. Today's guest, Karla, the program coordinator for the entire peer support program. She's also a CHD patient and has a lot of valuable insights to share. Before we get started, here's my quick disclaimer. Nothing said here constitutes medical advice. These are our own opinions and stories. I also like to include a trigger warning as we will discuss medical experiences that some listeners may find difficult. Listener discretion is always advised. With that out of the way, Karla, thank you for being here. I know it's been a bit of a bear to get this scheduled.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It was worth it to work through this and have this opportunity to speak with you and your audience about the peer support program. So thank you for having me.
Now, I know I touched on this a bit in the intro, but do you mind giving your own version of your background, your experience, and your journey with CHD?
Yeah, thank you. So I was diagnosed at birth with tetralogy of Fallot. My first open heart surgery was in 1985 when I was 9 months old. My second was in 2012. And then in 2022, I had my pulmonary valve replaced via a catheterization. And I'm happy to say I'm doing very well now. So that's my CHD journey in a nutshell.
And when you say via catheterization, that means it was not open heart to replace a pulmonary valve.
Yes, sir. That's correct. So the way they accessed my pulmonary valve was through, well, essentially like your groin, and then they'd take the camera up. It's so fascinating to me. If you can't tell, I don't have a medical background, so I don't know what the terminology for all of it is, but it's kind of like science meets magic in my head.
That part really is amazing to me. Now, can you explain what the peer mentor program is, peer support program is? And I keep using those terms interchangeably. What do you call the program? I know it has a few names.
Yeah, so I like to call it ACHA's peer support program, but I think peer mentor program also describes it very well, because that is essentially what we do. Is we connect CHD patients and their loved ones with a trained volunteer peer mentor. And so to just kind of elaborate on the program a little bit more, our program offers support to patients and their loved ones through one-on-one connections with other CHD patients and loved ones in a positive and supportive way. And while everyone's experience with CHD is unique, many people find it helpful to talk to someone who's been in or is currently in a similar situation. So our volunteer peer mentors work with each person to set goals for their match, connect them to valuable resources, share their experience, and provide guidance. And how that looks kind of practically is our matches are 3 months in length, and they focus on member education, self-advocacy, and empowerment. And most of our mentees report that they are most interested in connecting to someone who has a similar diagnosis to their own and following their match. What we hear most often is that they feel less alone after connecting with the peers.
Now, and just for the listeners here, in episode 6, we did deep dive with 2 active peer mentors to discuss this. But something you said there, you listed 3 topics that the mentors assist with, one of which being self-empowerment. Can you just elaborate on those focus areas and the value therein?
Yeah, I'm happy to. So the first focus area is member education. And so what our peer mentors do is direct them to our educational material on the ACHA's website. So that may be a CHD specific document that you can read more about your specific CHD. It could be a webinar that is helpful to that person's experience. And then the other piece is self-advocacy. And we encourage our mentees to be their own best advocate and share tips to help them advocate for themselves in the healthcare setting. And then that last empowerment piece, I think kind of ties the first two together, because I think member education and self-advocacy are empowering. I think it's empowering to commiserate with a peer. Sometimes it's just very validating to your own experience and makes you feel more confident in going to your provider and asking questions and taking care of your mental health, for example.
So I'll take the salesman pitch for a second here. So it sounds to me it's member education, which is learn about what you have and what's going on and the resources available to you. So it's where are the clinics? What do I have? Where do I need to go?
Yes.
As well as, learning about what my condition is and the best ways to treat it, and just educating yourself in a very specific ways. Member education is learn about it. Self-advocacy is go put that knowledge into practice and demand the right care. And I'm going to come back to that in a second, but it seems like building blocks for me, because learn about it, do something about it. And then the empowerment piece is keep doing something about it. Here's why you're right. Here's the confidence you need, because you just learned about it. You're advocating for yourself because of all people, you're the only person that's probably going to put yourself first, not very first, just put yourself first, and the empowerment to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And to me, that's really important because it all ties together. And I'm going to talk about myself for a minute because it's my favorite thing to do. I thought I was great at self-advocacy. I always found a great doctor growing up. When I was 19, 20, 21 on work insurance and switching back and forth, I would go find somebody with a great education and go to that guy or gal. Now, I didn't know there's a difference between acquired heart disease and congenital heart disease treatment. So I was finding great guys for someone my parents' age, not so much for CHD. So that's why education and advocacy ties so well together, and empowerment too, because I was an overconfident, arrogant little bastard. So I had the empowerment and I had the self-advocacy, but I was missing that key building block of member education. On the flip side of that, a few episodes have touched on this. I know some, especially young women who have gone through this process where they have the education and to a point they have the self-advocacy, but they don't have the empowerment to really keep pushing and finding a new doctor when they don't think one is listening to them. When there's something just not right enough, not enough that you can't prove it, but enough that you're uncomfortable. And that empowerment piece and saying, yes, you're right. And it ties back to why having a mentor who's gone through it is so important. Because saying, yes, you're right, let's go do something about it. Here's more resources. Here's what I would do with such a specific problem that is really a vital part of every other aspect of your healthcare and your life. It's important to have that kind of guidepost to take it. So all I'm doing is rephrasing what you said if I was with the used car salesman kind of attitude. So something I did want to touch on. You're the coordinator, but before that, you were a mentee. Can you just tell me, I don't want to just ask, what was that experience like? Because that's too open-ended, but you find out about the mentor program. What motivated you to sign up? And what was that first meeting like?
Well, first of all, thank you for asking this question, because it actually brings back some very fond memories for me. And I want to kind of circle back to something you were talking about, member education, advocacy, and empowerment, because as a young woman, I did fit into that category of wanting education, but not necessarily having empowerment. And Dresden, I think you've heard me say this before, but I'm the kind of person that I feel most comfortable with a lot of information. And so when I learned that I was going to have this second open heart surgery, I thought it would be helpful for me to speak with someone who had been through that surgery before to help me prepare. And it was helpful. But what was most impactful for me, and this was the piece that I wasn't quite expecting, was that my mentor was the first CHD patient that I knowingly spoke with. And prior to my match, I did not have a CHD community. I was very new to the Adult Congenital Heart Association, and I felt very alone and different from my peers. So having someone that I could relate to and commiserate with was deeply meaningful to me, and it's had a long-lasting positive impact on my life since.
Yeah, that reminds me of my favorite story is how I learned about the CHD community was a podcast in the UK following me and talking to some guy in Scotland who introduced me to the ACHA. So bringing it back around. So there is a power to speaking to someone who has the condition because it really is a silent, hidden, I don't want to call it a disability per se, but it's a hidden birth defect where I've had it happen twice in recent memory where I'm talking to somebody about my support for the ACHA and why, and they both said something along the lines of, well, yeah, I had something like that. And it turns out they had a VSD that closed, a hole in the heart that closed, or some kind of arrhythmia or tachycardia or whatever the fancy term is for an irregular heartbeat or electro. It's amazing to me how even when we have a huge network of people, it's not something that comes up all the time. So we don't know when we're talking to the patient. So saying it's the first patient you spoke to really, really hit home for me. Now, you've seen both sides of the program, and you've seen a lot of peer mentors. In your opinion, and from what you know now, what makes someone a great mentor? What qualities matter most?
That's a really good question. I'm thinking of our peer mentors and the amazing people they are and how they inspire me every day. And I think that they're each unique and kind of bring something special to the team. However, I do think there are some general qualities that make someone a great mentor. And I think some of the qualities are being a good listener. As a peer mentor, you might be called upon to share your story, but what you're really there for is to listen and to be that sounding board and to share resources with that individual and really be a witness to their story. With that in mind, I think good communication skills, both written and verbal, and I think most important is a desire to connect one-on-one with other patients and loved ones and just having that sense of empathy and really wanting to have that one-on-one connection. I think that's what's unique about our program.
I like that you said good listener because as long as I've been doing this podcast now, something I've still struggled with is listening without offering an immediate solution or aligning it with my experience to try to help get to that next stage. So when you say good listener, you mean let someone explain their issue and talk it out with you, ask the right questions, almost like you're guiding them. Anyway, now going back to the details of the program, one of the requirements I saw was that it takes a reference letter from an ACHD team member. Now, to me, that's a high barrier to entry. What's the definition of an ACHD team member? And what's the value of getting that recommendation?
This is a really great question that you bring up, and I'm happy to kind of share a bit to shine some light on this requirement. So I think it essentially goes back to ACHA's vision, which is that every adult with CHD receives specialized cardiac care. And so what that means is if you were diagnosed with a congenital heart disease, you should be seen by an adult congenital cardiologist at least once in your lifetime, according to the guidelines set by the American College of Cardiology. And so that reference letter should be written by someone on your care team that you see at your adult congenital cardiologist office. So it could be a nurse practitioner. It could be an interventionalist, just someone who's part of that team for you. I think that having this letter to us really speaks to the applicant's understanding and support of ACHA's vision and our our hope to see every adult in specialized care.
I'm going to push on this a little bit harder because let's say I wanted to go apply right now. Do I need to go get this letter before I can apply, or is this a secondary criteria? And I say this because, we're going to be looking at a February deadline here. What if they're not able to get that letter in time?
So the deadline for the reference letters is on February 1st, and we understand that that letter can take time to get. And in fact, if anyone listening is considering applying, I would suggest reaching out to that first. Our providers are very busy and we understand that. And so we can be flexible. We're not going to say can't apply, didn't come in by the first, you're done, but it's still a very meaningful piece of the onboarding process.
So as long as there's a letter coming in the near future by the 21st, they can reach out and not negotiate, but just explain the situation and get everyone on the same page.
Absolutely. And I would encourage anyone to reach out to me and just kind of let me know the status. Let me know, hey, I've asked and I've sent a friendly nudge. They've said they'll write it for me. It's on its way. So I think communication goes a long way.
And that goes back to what we were saying before about how it's all about just talking to people.
Yeah. Being communicative. Yeah.
Communicative. Now, this part really interested me. So you've worked with so many mentees over the years, and we've talked about your experience and what it means for it to be a good mentor, what qualities that, if someone has, they should really consider applying. Are there any stories that you can share, and obviously anonymously, of an effect the program has had? Maybe something good that has happened, and maybe something not so good, something that stuck out to you and has led to a change where it's not going to happen again?
Yeah. There is a story from back when I was a peer mentor that I found has really stuck with me. I was matched with a young woman who was just an incredible young lady, and she had been lost to care. So she wasn't being seen by any cardiologist, and she was feeling symptomatic. And she found ACHA while she was trying to do some research about her symptoms, and, long story short, connected with me. And together I took her to ACHA's website, and we used the clinic directory there to help her locate an adult congenital cardiologist that she could see. And that was essentially the goal of our match, was to help her find the appropriate care that she needed and deserved. And she set up her first appointment with her cardiologist, and I was really happy for her and so proud that she had, really advocated for herself and trusted her gut and done everything that she could to educate herself. And unfortunately, during that appointment, she learned that she needed an open heart surgery. And it wasn't emergent, but it was urgent. And so it was challenging for her to have to go from, just being lost to care, thinking, everything's probably fine, to I need to have open heart surgery relatively soon. And so the focus of our match really shifted, and it became about supporting her through that. And we have an incredible resource, Preparing for Heart Surgery Guide, which was written by peer mentors. And we shared that with her and really just kind of supported her as she prepared for that surgery. And that match stays with me because I've heard similar stories from my fellow peer mentors and have seen similar matches as the coordinator. And again, I think it kind of ties back to our vision of seeing every adult with CHD receiving that kind of specialized care. That's definitely something that sticks with me.
It's scary to think about what would have happened if she hadn't found the ACHA and had to go through it on her own.
Exactly. Yes.
Might have delayed care and wouldn't have had the resources to prepare.
Exactly.
How many mentors and mentees do you guys have now?
So we currently have 49 peer mentors representing 22 states. Most are patients, but we do have a handful of loved ones, such as parents, spouses, partners, sibling, and a girlfriend of a patient.
And that's an interesting point. So for it to be directly applicable, this isn't just a support program for patients. This is for if you are a partner, a loved one, a parent, a girlfriend, a child, anyone who needs that kind of community support, help with the direction of care can really reach out.
Yes, absolutely.
And then let's talk about mentees for a second. I know the ACHA is focused on adult care, even though they are the leading organization for resources that help adults and children, and basically are the American Congenital Heart Association in terms of their impact. But this focus on adult care, do you need to be an adult to apply, or do you guys take teenagers that are transitioning to adult care?
That's a really good question. And we do support patients who are 18 years or older. I will say, though, that we do receive requests from parents whose children are at that transition age, and we often support the parents during that transition. So we do focus on the adult side. And I think in supporting the patient's caregivers, that in turn helps support the patient.
Gotcha. I know that makes a lot of sense to me. So if I'm a parent and I have a child who's going through it now, I can reach out, but we can't really talk to people under 18.
Yes, that's correct.
And that makes sense from a confidentiality standpoint for those kind of regulations. So that makes a lot of sense to me. Something that might seem a little bit out of nowhere, but really stuck out to me when I was reading through everything, preparing for this. Now, I've learned in the last year that there is a huge gap, well documented, in mental health support for patients. And we're developing a bunch of research now about what, mental issues or trauma that CHD patients may have, and what those commonalities are and how that can be best treated. I mean, just in general, how a patient can be best supported from a mental health perspective. But there is a huge need for more research and more support in that area. Do you think, and I know we can't say that it takes the place of mental health care, I would never say that, but do you think this peer support program helps start to fill that gap? Where if I can't find I've had multiple therapists, psychiatrists, and each one of them was great for helping me with understanding CHD once I explained to them what CHD was, which is a big undertaking. So that gap exists. I personally think mentorship can help fill a hole there. Am I misunderstanding it? Is that not quite right?
No, I think this is a really important conversation to have, and I think you're bringing up a really good point. And as you were sharing, it reminded me of something that you, Rick Pewter, and Jenny Fox shared on your last podcast episode about the peer support program. You said peer support complements the existing support system. So to kind of echo what you were saying, I don't think peer support is a substitute for professional mental health services or a substitute for support from our loved ones. But I think the gap is that people feel less alone when they can connect to a peer. And during our peer mentor trainings, our mental health consultant, Tracy Levecki, she shares this quote with us that has, again, really resonated with me. It says, CHD patients suffer silent and alone. And that quote about suffering silently is taken from a psychosocial profile of adults with complex congenital heart disease from the Mayo Clinic back in the year 2000. And so I asked Tracy about the quote, and I asked her to share what that quote meant to her. And she said that it really enforced her belief that this patient population needs more support and resources. And so kind of bringing it back to the peer support program, most common piece of feedback we get from our mentees is that they feel less alone. And so in my opinion, I think that is the gap that we're feeling. We're feeling that sense of isolation and being different from our peers. And to your point, when you're talking about how it can be a lot to elaborate on what CHD is, and what's nice when you're talking to a peer is you can kind of skip that part. So for example, I don't have to explain what my MRI is before I can share with someone why I may be feeling nervous about that. And I think that that can be really helpful.
Yap on that for a second, because it made me realize, well, not realize, but maybe want to say something. the importance of peer support. And I thought about this a lot after talking to Jenny and Rick, and that's episode 6, Not Alone Anymore, which properly named based on what you just said. But I think a lot about not only what I went through, but what my parents and siblings were going through at the same time. And I've said this in my speeches at the Walk for 1 in 100, and I've said this probably on other episodes, but we didn't know the community existed. They always told me I was 1 in a million. And that might be the case for my specific combination of defects. When you start thinking about people that have one of those defects or a similar defect or any CHD, I mean, there was a community there I should have been able to go find. And I just didn't know where to start. And I think it would have made, everything went okay for me, all things considered. But I don't know what it would have been like to have a support system of people who got it. It is important to have someone who gets it. What I had was 2 parents who, I wasn't old enough to understand the surgeries. I mean, I was an infant for the major ones. So I had parents who had fought through it. And I had their unyielding support, as most people get from parents or caregivers. But it is a different perspective from fighting for your child's life to fighting for your own. And my biggest support came from my little brother, who's barely a year younger than me. And his support was, you're not allowed to not keep up. You're not allowed to not do this. You're not allowed to not do that. And that was great for me. It's exactly what I needed. It would have been nice to have someone to talk to who could tell me what to expect and what was next. And it would have been nice for my parents to have someone to talk to, because I mean, I've sent my parents both the links to the podcast, and I can tell when it starts to kind of, I don't like to say trigger because it's a powerful word, but it starts to affect them, because all of a sudden they're back there not knowing what's going to happen to their kid. So I think the power of peer support is really, I've been there. Here's what's going to happen. Here's how you get through it. You're not alone. Now, that was a very powerful and depressing thing. So let's get back to the happy tone. The program has been running for 15 years now, trained 130 mentors. Karla, what's next for your program?
So, okay, I'm not a medical professional, so take this with a grain of salt, but I believe there are 35 congenital heart diseases, and we have 23 represented in our program currently. And so with that number in mind, how I see our program changing in the coming years and growing is increasing the diversity of our program so that we can more closely meet people's needs and connect people to someone who has more of a similar situation to their own.
So what we really need is someone like me with 3 or 4 separate, really specialized defects to really get in there and pump those numbers up.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Something you said there, and the diversity of the program. And we're talking about diversity in respect to heart defects, but I also think it's helpful. And again, I'm not a doctor, but it's been my experience that the majority of cardiologists I've dealt with are older white men, which that demographic makeup is going to change over time as more of the population is awarded more of the same opportunity that they weren't awarded 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago. But there is a difference between talking to a professional that has nothing in common with you aside from they're treating the condition you have, and talking to a peer that will have maybe age similar, maybe the same sex, maybe the same ethnicity. I'm a big fan of the program because I'm just thinking about how it would have helped me and my friends who didn't have it.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate you kind of highlighting the diversity piece, because I think that that's really important to us, because CHD does not discriminate, and many people from many different backgrounds and many different ethnicities are impacted, and we want to help as many who are interested in peer support as we can. And, I think and I'm also not a mental health professional, so take this with a grain of salt, but I think that there's a sense of kind of psychological safety that people get when they're connecting to someone whose experiences are maybe more similar to their own. And so I think, as many connections as we can make in terms of, age and sometimes even geography, I understand that being in different time zones can make connecting complicated. So we want to keep that in mind as we're moving forward with our program.
Well said. Now, going to ask some of the hard questions now because we're getting close to time, but what would you say to a patient or family member who's hesitant about seeking out a mentor, about signing up for getting a mentor, not as a mentor, but to get matched with someone?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I think that the first thing I would say is we don't want you to do anything that makes you uncomfortable, first and foremost. And there may be other resources that would be more helpful to you personally. I think to anyone who's maybe on the fence about it, would first just acknowledge that there is an unfortunate stigma around getting support, but you are not alone. Our program has supported over 2,000 people, myself included. And, I would add that I think it's a brave act of self-care to reach out for support. And so my encouragement to you would be to perhaps pocket the program for a time when you maybe feel more comfortable and would like to connect with a peer. And if so, we'll be here for you. We'd love to talk to you. And I'm always happy to answer any questions anyone might have about the program that might make them feel more at ease.
So reach out if they have questions, but I'm going to fight you on the first part of that, or don't do something that makes you uncomfortable.
Okay.
Do something that makes you uncomfortable. And if you're a patient listening to this and you're on the fence, you got to take care of yourself. And sometimes that means fighting for your voice. And sometimes that means breaking out of your comfort zone because your heart's not going to wait till you're comfortable. Cardiac care is not comfortable. I mean, as someone who's recovered from heart surgeries, it's not a cakewalk, but it's better than the alternative. And I can say that loudly with a straight face, because at the end of the day, if you break out of your comfort zone, and a lot of life is like this, if you break out of your comfort zone and you do what needs to be done, you're going to thank yourself for it for the next, decade and, all the time after that. For the rest of your life, you're going to be happy you did it. Karla, I respect your politician answer, and I'm going to be the dick right now and say that break out of your comfort zone, do what needs to be done, and you're going to thank yourself for it. Now, on the flip side of that, and I'll tie this to my own experience, I was always hesitant to speak up because the patient, because you don't look sick. I was able to, fortunately, be able to keep up with my peers, even after the operations and the cardiac care. I had a heart surgery at 16. I was back in the gym 2 days later. Against doctor's orders, if you're listening to this, don't do that. Very bad idea. I got lucky. A lot of my life has been getting lucky. But that being said, I did not think I had enough of an issue to justify speaking up, to justify making my voice loud, and to justify telling my story. And a big part of getting over it was getting over myself and realizing that I do have the right and I have gone through it. So if someone's looking at being a peer mentor and they're on the fence because either they don't know if they have the experience you need or they don't know if they have the right kind of personality for it, what would you say to them? What would you say to them to push them over the fence?
So I'll try to be less political this time. So if you aren't sure if being a mentor is for you, okay, maybe I'm going to be a little political.
Don't worry, I'll rephrase it.
Thanks. First of all, I want to say that's okay. And I think in this situation, that's actually a good thing. My interventionalist said something interesting to me right before my catheterization. He said, we need everybody. And I would echo that the CHD community needs everybody. And I think everyone has unique experiences and talents and expertise, and the CHD community needs those. And if you're on the fence about peer mentoring in particular, first of all, again, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have that might help sway you one way or the other. But I would just check in with yourself and ask yourself, is providing peer support, guidance, and resources to my fellow patients important to me? And if the answer is yes, well, there you go.
The two things you said there, it's actually a good thing if you're on the fence, because that kind of hesitancy, and I'm paraphrasing here, that kind of hesitancy shows forethought, empathy, and care, because you're wondering if I can be useful. So basically, if you're on the fence, it means you should do it because you're already at the right spot. Something else you said, we need everybody. I'm going to bang the drum on that because we do need everybody. We need patient experiences from all walks of life because you don't know who's going to hear your story and become comfortable with it. You've got to be the trailblazer. Otherwise, the people after you with your same spot are also going to think the same way you are, where should I speak up? And that's really the impact is you need to speak up so that the people after you are comfortable speaking up, which ties to something I said in the other episode. And I'm going to say it again with as much emphasis as I can. Go be a mentor. And if you go apply for a mentor, and if you don't need a mentor, then go be a mentor. If you're a patient, if you're a parent, if you're a girlfriend's friend's sister, if you don't need that support, then go give that support. Because, I mean, in my opinion, being a mentor or interviewing people on a podcast, it gives you the same, not the same benefit, but it gives you something you need. You need to also know that you're in that community. And by helping someone else, you help yourself. By helping someone else, you can help yourself. Now, we're going to move to our close. I'm going to ask you my question about what it means to you. Before I do that, where can I go to find more information about this program? Where do I go to apply?
Great. Good question.
If my passionate speech has made you either want to be a mentor or be a mentee, what do I do next?
All right. So the good news is the instructions are going to take you to the same place regardless. So you want to visit ACHA's website at www.ACHA'sHeart.org. And you're going to go to the tab for information and support. And at the top of programs is our heart-to-heart peer support program. And when you click on that, you will see that link to the peer mentor applications if you're looking to become a peer mentor. But you'll also see the request form if you are looking to be matched with a peer mentor. And then I'll go ahead and plug my email address here as well in case you just want to reach out to me directly. It's kdeal, as in deal a deck of cards, at ACHA'sHeart.org.
So KDEAL at ACHA'sHeart.org.
Yes, sir.
Now, if you don't need a mentor, go be a mentor. To wrap up, I like to ask all my guests one thing. And this is going to be a big question for you because you've been a patient, you've been a mentee, you've been a mentor, and now you're leading an army of mentors to save the day. But you've also had the other side of that where you've had open heart and you've had emergency heart surgeries and you've had to go through the grinder, get where you are. After all that, what does CHD mean to you? Not the medical definition, not what do defects mean to you? What does congenital heart disease and the community and this program mean to you after everything you've been through?
Well, first of all, I want to say I love that you ask this question, and I've really enjoyed listening to your other guests answer it. And so you may hear some echoes, but it's really been nice to reflect on my answer and think of what my CHD does mean to me. And this may sound strange, but I think my CHD has been a really great teacher. I think I've learned a lot about life and myself and what is important to me in life, such as empathy and gratitude. And I think my journey as a CHD patient has made me more resilient. And, Justin, I'm sure you've experienced this, but as CHD patients, life does not spare us from other trials life can offer. And I often find myself reflecting on situations I've been through as a CHD patient and kind of applying some of those lessons to other areas of my life. For example, I'll remind myself, well, you advocated for yourself here, or you trusted your gut there, and look at the positive outcome you have. And so I really appreciate the lessons that I've learned from my experience. And what the program means to me is kind of in a similar vein. I learned a lot from my peer mentor. I learned the importance of community and how it can be life-changing. And I learned a lot from our peer mentors, and they inspire me every day. And it's such a joy to get to work with them. And while I'm the coordinator, I certainly don't do this work alone. I'm surrounded by a great team, like our Director of Patient Advocacy and Resources, Janine Guglielmino, our mental health consultant, Tracy Lebecki. I often consult with our Senior Education Manager, Paula Miller, and our senior ambassadors. And so I really appreciate the team approach and the sense of community and the lessons that I've got to learn and continue to learn from all of them.
I've met all those ladies and they are wonderful. You had me a little bit choked up there because, I mean, while your answer really it reflects a lot of what we've heard so far. I've been through this and I've come out the other side stronger for it. And now I know what I'm capable of. I've, learned how to manage my time. I've learned how to be a better employee, a better family member, a more empathetic human being. But something you said there, it's a very mature way. I mean, resilient. Everyone has said resilient, which I find phenomenal because it's I have yet to have someone say something that's not silver linings through and through, but resilience and taking the lessons and applying it, which is it's saying the same thing, but in a much more calm and mature way. And that's what I really like. It's no matter how you look at it, I can see myself as a tough bastard that's been through all this and can handle anything life throws at me. But the other side of that coin is I know what I'm capable of. I know what I can do when the pressure is on. And I know the importance of being there for people because so many people have been there for me. I know the importance of community support because the first time I was surrounded by a bunch of CHD patients at a heart event, it was a life-changing experience. I know the importance of me getting up there and rambling about my little journey because I remember the first time hearing someone tell their story and figuring out like, okay, I'm not that special. And we're all individual and we're all special in our own little way. But knowing that we're not trailblazers is sickly comforting because the fact that someone's gone through it before means someone's gotten to the other side of it before. And that's just wonderful to think about for me.
Thank you for elaborating on that. I appreciated how you shared how it makes you a good employee and good at planning. I think there's certainly a lot of areas of our lives that can be positively impacted through our experiences, and certainly wouldn't wish this on anyone, but there is a silver lining.
Well, I'm going to do our walk-off now, but before I do that, remember guys, KDEAL, KDEAL at ACHA'sHeart.org if you have questions. I'll put the link to apply in the show notes. I'll be plugging this link every day until the 18th and then some. And again, the application to be a mentor may closed, but if you want a mentor, you can go get one at any time. And it is, Karla will say different, but I don't care if it's uncomfortable for you. It is helpful and you deserve it. You deserve support if you have every defect in the book or if you have a comparatively minor one. You deserve support. And if you don't need a mentor, then go be a mentor. And with that, that was Karla Deal, patient and program director for the ACHA's Peer Support Program, also called the Heart to Heart Program. On the ACHA's website, ACHA'sHeart.org. I will put the link everywhere. And remember, if you have any questions or comments on the episode, you can reach out through our website at 1%heart.com. You can email support at 1%heart.com, or you can message us on Instagram at the CHD podcast. Look forward to talking to you soon. Thank you for listening.